Welcome back, artists. I'm Waiya Paints, and this week I'm doing a prop from a sci-fi movie so wild it had to come from the 80s. I'm gonna polish up my throwing skills as we paint up the 5-pointed glaive from Krull. And sure, it does not look like a glaive at all, but it is shiny spinny death that looks great on screen. And I've got to paint up 2 of these for a client that sent me an STL that is more of a reimagined fan version of the glaive. But so long as we approach it systematically, we're gonna have some awesome looking props hanging off our wall in no time. And even if you're not gonna be painting glaives yourself, this video is going to show you how to handle old gold surfaces with ease so that you can apply it to your next project. For now, time isn't wasting, so meet me over at the painting table. I'm gonna grab my brushes. Let's get started. Unlike usual, there's no base to start with, so we're jumping straight into the main body. Here, I have the 2 glaives cleaned and sanded smooth, primed in black. I also crazy glued some temporary paper clips to be able to hang these to dry. This is necessary for a perfectly even varnish. I also don't want to undersell the sanding portion either. On a project like this, the sanding will be the lion's share of the work, and unfortunately with a highly detailed surface like this, you can end up with areas that you really can't sand out smooth without sanding off details. In general, I think it's better to side with caution and not aggressively sand in these areas. That, along with the shape of the main body, I have to accept that some support marks are going to be unavoidable. But let's get to painting with death metal. This will be the base of our main gold color and tint all the deepest shadows slightly yellow. This being a metallic and me needing a very smooth foundation to build on means I should use a solid medium dry brush to get that coverage as quickly as I can. The only real holdup here will be splitting the painting of each star, and you're going to have to wait for the first forearms to dry so that the one that you used as a handle can be painted. Just know, if you're going the commando route like me here, wash your hands well and handle it gingerly. Having excess sweat and oil on your hands or gripping too hard can cut the grooves of your fingerprints into the paint. So take it easy and you should be good. As you can see, a little bit of restraint got me a nice and even base to start from. Now to glitz it up with a bit of greedy gold. Here I went with a medium to light dry brush. I'm looking to knock back about 80% of the death metal to form a very natural looking shadow. There may be an urge to try to do this with a heavier load to make it happen faster, but this can quickly lead to washing out all of the details by eliminating those shadows altogether. Also, while a bit of poking was necessary to get full coverage in the first step, here I want to keep the brush and the angle more parallel to the surface. This, along with keeping the strokes perpendicular to the sharper details, will put this mid-tone right where it needs to be without having to overthink it. Just be sure to get almost complete coverage on the rounded heads. You want these to appear brighter, as they should reflect a lot more light. Finally, going slow here makes it a lot simpler to keep this highlight even over all of the spokes and sides. Here's a good comparison of where it started and about where I want to finish this layer. So from here on out, I'll be coming back to this often to match the intensity. With the midtones done, it's time for a highlight with bright gold. This is the final chef kiss on the gold, so a light fluttering touch is paramount. Really lock in and focus on each detail that you want to bring out and only give it a couple of swipes to dust the tops. This will be most effective along the arms where the filigree is. Now for the end bits, make sure to catch the hard edges for sure. Then think about the orientation that you want to hang the glade. In this case, I'm going to be using the arm that I have the clip on as the top arm. From here, I want to add a touch more of this highlight to the top side surfaces. It's a step that takes an extra 30 seconds that adds an extra layer of flair. Just be reserved with it. If you end up putting it everywhere, it doesn't look special where it is. After this dried, I gave it a few coats of clear coat varnish and then left it to cure for a few hours. Meanwhile, I can get started working on these blades, and while they did take a touch of sanding to get ready for the painting, it was a far more enjoyable experience compared to the body. To get me going, black metal. Just like with death metal, this is going to serve as the base, so I want an all-over coverage. And since these are perfectly smooth blades, the paint job needs to be just as smooth to match. Here, my alligator clips pulled the MVP trophy to help me paint clean. I picked these up in a pack of 50 for about $8. It's just too bad they're usually not as practical at the scale I usually print in, but when I can use them, they're always the right tool. Next, I stepped up to gunmetal for a mid-tone reflection. Now in reality, since each of these blades would be sitting at different angles, each one would have a completely different reflection pattern. But that's for more advanced video. I want to keep this simple, and I have 10 blades to paint. So I'm picking a single reflection angle and I'm just going to repeat it. The slight variation of my brush strokes should lend a bit of enough difference to make each one unique. So with that in mind, I pushed this towards the bottom of each serration and I caught heavier coverage towards the tip along the spine. Having these highlights in opposite quadrants like this adds a nice dynamic play of light. Finally, Mithril comes in for the final touch. Here, all that's needed is a light treatment on the sharp edge, a soft dusting on the knuckle. I also felt a bit along the sides gave the overall blade shape a bit more definition. But again, just like the bright gold, this needs to be very reserved or we risk blowing out those mid-tones. And as a bonus, if you keep your stroke straight, you can get away with a touch of a heavy hand, as it'll look like a grain to the metal or a sharpening mark. That way, you get a little extra detail for free. After I was happy with them, I gave them a few coats of varnish and I left them to cure. While the varnish dries, it's a great time to take a moment to thank my subscribers over on Patreon. Each month, y'all keep showing me the love, and I can't help but to reflect it back at you. Thank you so much. If you would like to join the Painting Pantheon, you'll find a link in the description below. Or you can help the painting party by subscribing right here on YouTube. And if you're feeling up for it, let me know in the comments that you liked it. Any way you do it, I'm glad that you're here. But with that done, let's get back to work. Getting back into it on the main body, I want to tackle these green space gems on the end. Now, in the movie, the weapon is decked out with some kind of space emeralds for details, so I might as well do something fun. Starting with Cultist Rope. Now, I know this looks like a very drab green, and you'd be right. I'm using this really to cover the gold. While I will get darker, brighter, and more vibrant than this, laying down this gray heavy green is going to knock down all the reflectivity of the metallic while giving me a green tone with a neutral value. Easy to darken or lighten. First up to darken, Angel Green. I'm also going to need a scuzzy brush, and since Brushy finally saw his last days, I scruffed up a cheapo for the purpose. Now with baby Brushy here, I can use the frayed size to lay down a stipple and start an interesting texture. The important thing to watch for here is to make sure you don't overstep the boundaries. Splotches of green will show up like a sore thumb, so be very aware where those stray bristles will land. If you need to, cut off more of the wilder hairs to give you a bit more control. On average, each stone should only need 7 to 10 dabs to get a soft modeling on the surface. And once again, after you get the first 5 done, use them as a guide to try to match the effect on the remaining 15. Now it's time for snake scales for an interesting pop of brightness. I'm using the same stippling as before, but now I want to use the thinnest side of the brush where it's more single hairs protruding. This lets me put down tiny semi-random pips of color. And in this step, you're going to have a lot more wiggle room when it comes to keeping them even. In natural stones, surface colors will vary wildly, even when those surfaces all come from the same stone. So if you go a touch too heavy on one or a bit too light on a different one, don't try to fix it until you finish this highlight on all the stones. This way you can evaluate it with all the other ones next to it. It standing out a little bit just adds character. Just be sure that it's not too much that it grabs attention from the piece as a whole. So in other words, only fix it if you can't stop looking at it. Now for some green tone. Here, I'm using this wash as a normalizer, which means it's tinting all of the colors towards a common green. This is going to help unify those 3 greens I use so they look like they're part of the same family, as if each of them has a part of the other colors in its roots. Ultimately, this will give a grounded level of realism for the final look. Next, I mixed up some gunmetal and airbrush medium as it thins down the metallics well while keeping the coverage high, which is absolutely needed here to paint these rings. In situations like this where I want to paint a ring that's between 2 surfaces, painting from the highest point and slowly edging towards the boundary gives me the most paint control, which is paramount as we want to keep this space jade super clean. As an extra safety net, I tend to paint the jewels as well. This is sort of a final check on my paint load, making sure I don't flood the detail. Next, I grab some oil stains to shade the center detail. The only thing I'm looking for is some decent separation from the surrounding ring. After which, I gave it a solid 20 minutes to dry. After that dry session, chaotic red was step 1 for the gems. Just like putting down the gunmetal, I'm using the highest point to do a final check on my paint load, then slowly inching towards the edge I want from above. And it's all about that edge because it's doing double duty as being the end of the gem and defining the metal ring. So you need it as sharp as you can manage. Just lock in and do all 20. Now for a highlight of pure red. Now once again, I want to take into account what direction the glaive will be displayed in. And contrary to your first instinct, this highlight shouldn't go on the top side of each of the gems. Part of a gem's beauty is how it plays with light, and with a round jewel like this, it would have a general soft light coming out of the bottom, while its sharper lights will come out of the top. So we want to put a splotch of this red on the bottom half of each stone. And don't worry about blending. A crisp line here will not look out of place. Next, I switch to a detail brush to add the tiny dots of light that should be coming out of the top halves. After which, each gem got a single pip of white as a final pop of reflection. Trust me when I say that you want to keep these small, or they'll quickly start looking like dabs of paint and break the illusion. Finally, I used a touch of metal medium as a very light dry brush on the center pinwheel. This will add a bit of definition to the center spike and put a nice thin edge highlight on the surrounding ring. After this, I gave it a final few coats of varnish and called it done. And oh boy, this looks dangerous! While it's not a one-to-one recreation of the original movie prop, I think this homage does a good job of hitting all the key design elements while still having a bit of flair. And I wish I could share where you could get this STL, but it was just included with the commission request. If my client ever lets me know where he found it, I'll be sure to update the description. For now, I've got to get on to the next project. So, as always, thank you for watching, stay creative, and always enjoy the process.